if everybody in this audience felt itchy inside when Brandy was talking. I know I did. I want to thank Brandy for her unfiltered authenticity and her willingness to share her story, because it gives us an opportunity today to have some conversations of significance and hopefully impact a lot of athletes and coaches alike. I think she's figured out a lot in her short 22 years already. I think one of the reasons that I felt uncomfortable as Brandy began to talk, and maybe you did too, is because maybe you recognized yourself a little bit there, and you remembered when you were the athlete who was playing and looking and waiting for validation and aching for approval and yearning for somebody to give you that attaboy. Or maybe you're sitting out there right now and you just realize that you never really grew out of that, and maybe you're the person right now who is still performing and living and looking and waiting for the world to weigh in and tell you whether or not you measure up. Or maybe you're the coach who's sitting there right now and realizes that you were the judge and jury of one, even though you didn't ask to be, who might be holding that athlete's opinion of herself in your very human hands. And I think all of those scenarios make us itch in a place we can't get to scratch, and it makes us uncomfortable. And sometimes that discomfort leads to overgeneralizations like elite athletic competition must be really, really bad. Or if you sacrifice at an extreme level, then it'll never really be worth it. And yet at the same time, I would assert that most of us here would say that that thing that we love best about who we are and how we are was probably either developed or at least honed through participation in sport. And so it feels kind of like a dichotomy, but I don't think it is at all. Because I think that the competition and the standard, both of those are really neutral. I don't think that they're good or bad in and of themselves. I think that is the way we experience sport that gives it the power. This past season, we were in the middle of a up and down roller coaster kind of Big 12 experience. And I have a weekly radio show at a local barbecue joint called Rudy's. And we were kind of on the win one, lose one, win one, lose one, really tough road that is the Big 12. And on a random Thursday night in the middle of this, my precious radio host asked me a very benign question, probably like, how are you doing tonight? I'm not really sure what the question was, but it was pretty benign. And I was so full of mama bear protectorant for my team. They were aching and they were struggling, and it was like right up to here. And so my answer to his question, regardless of what the question was, just sort of spewed out like verbal vomit. And I went on to this little soapbox about what they were feeling. And I figured Brett was going to throw up a picture right now because I was wearing a flannel shirt. And Brett has this idea like that everybody from Oklahoma like is barefoot and wearing a flannel shirt or something. Like it's this cowboy couture kind of thing. And I thought I was doing an urban street cred, you know, like I'm really cool Oklahoma with a flannel on. But this is what I said in essence to my show's host. I said that I think it's really, really hard to be a young person today. And I think it's maybe even really harder to be a student athlete. And I think that when I participated in sport, the results were pretty much flat. You know, like you played the game, and the next day in the local paper there'd be a write-up, and maybe if it was a really big game, the county paper might pick it up, maybe even the state paper. And you got one day, you got a shelf life of one day, a 24-hour news cycle. Maybe they mention it on the radio, or maybe the 10 o'clock news. It's got to be a really big game, though. Otherwise, it just happens, you process it, you deal with it, and you move on. It had a shelf life. My result-oriented world of sport participation was pretty flat, actually. And the world now for our student athletes is so not flat. With social media, their world and their results have so much dimension. There's a ticker that runs across the TV screen all the time. There are radio stations that are created simply to talk about sporting events and performances. There's social media that makes what you do live and live and live and live. And everybody has an idea and an opinion about that. Results are dimensional. And so for student athletes who have this idea, this expectation level of what they want to do, whether it's perceived or real, it doesn't really matter. And then they come in with a performance that is reality. There is a chasm between the two. And in that vat pours liquid disappointment. And for guys, young guys who are trying to figure out who they are, and for some of us who have been trying to do that for a long, long time, it gets very, very difficult. The road is treacherous and it's an arduous task. I have in my bedroom on the wall this quote from Og Mandino, which begins with, "Neglect not the little things," and then goes on to talk about a whole host of things. But it says at the end that you should always seek to do your very best. It does not matter what the rest of the world thinks. It is of prime importance, however, what you think. And I love that. It does not matter what the rest of the world thinks. It is, however, of prime importance what you think. That's called finding your voice. That's called measuring yourself by your own standard of excellence. That's called just keeping the rest of the world out and shielding yourself from their opinions. And right now, with the way social media rolls, everybody has a comment or an opinion about everything. What we do, where we go, how we look, what we do in our performances, everything is either liked or it's disliked. Everybody has an opinion. And so it gets so noisy, it's really, really hard to find your voice. You know, when my kids were little and I taught them to swim, I can remember it just being an absolute mess. You take them into the pool and they're terrified and they're slapping you and smacking you and splashing anything and everything and bobbing up and down and they're choking, and it's just a mess. It's just a nightmare because we're asking them to do something that they've never been asked to do before in an arena where they've never been. It's all so new and different. And so you work with them, and after a while, they get to where they don't splash quite as much, and they get to where they can move around, and sometimes even at the beginning, it's kind of in a circle, because while they figure out a little bit how to navigate the water, they don't know how to take it where they want to go. And so after a while, they go around, and you can move your hand from underneath their tummy, and they find their way. Eventually, they learn to swim. And when I think about what our job is and what our supreme responsibility is as coaches and teachers, it is to help our kids learn to navigate liquid disappointment. It is to help our kids learn to find their own voice. It is ultimately, hopefully, to have them not need us quite so much. You know, when you teach kids to find their own voice, it's kind of like when you go bowling. And those little bumper guards come up, you know, when kids are bowling or when I am either. And you roll your ball down the lane and that just kind of keeps it there. When our young athletes figure out who they are and what they sound like, then they have a feedback loop for life. They can self-correct from here to forward and remain in the lane that they want to be in. And when you're able to do that, then that's how the joy gets in. And that's when the relationships grow. And that's where the fulfillment resides. That's exactly what happened in Brandy's senior year of college. That's exactly where she got to. The water was still really deep, but Brandy had learned to swim. Thank you.